Hi, in this video I want to talk about burden of proof and things like that, and objective and subjective, and how our point of view obviously can be skewed by our subjective point of views and such and things like that, and burden of proof and arguments, and who the burden of proof is on, and how the burden of proof is on the person making the positive claim. So in the last video I made, it's about the philosophers, going through the list and giving my own interpretation, understanding, and refutation, if anything, debunking of their philosophies and the description of their philosophies. So I wanted to go back and make a couple corrections on a few of the philosophers that I may have confused on, and they are Gwf Hagel, and I think his whole idea is with the owl of the Minerva spreads its wings with only with the falling of the dusk, is an idea that basically about how enlightenment can only be understood, and once it's over, so it's sort of like this fleeting argument. Once it's over, and once you're in the part of an enlightenment era, you don't realize what the enlightenment era was about in terms of philosophy and understanding philosophy and the philosophies that you speak. You don't necessarily know the summation of these philosophies in the era that you live in until the era is over, and the era is over, and you don't know until the era is over until they consider the era is over, or it's something retrospectively that you can understand, or you never know it's over until the philosophers in an era have died. And once they have died, you don't know, and they don't exist. They don't know what the true understanding of the era that they existed in. So once they're dead, they don't know, and they don't know what it was about because the era is already over. They're already over, and they can't understand necessarily what they're talking about. And that's not necessarily a philosophical idea, I would say, in consideration of recognizing an era and a philosophical period that you're living in. That's obviously something, unless there's some kind of meaning that I didn't necessarily get out of the summation of it. I think that's a good enough explanation, and it's something I'm kind of benign towards. I guess that makes enough sense in terms of the philosophical Enlightenment eras and periods of philosophy and understanding it, and looking in expectations and wondering what the era is about, and so on and so forth. Obviously, it's something that you don't necessarily know about the summation of an era until once it's over. So that's obviously a consideration. And I wanted to do another one on the Occams Razor thing. I hadn't looked up Occams Razor at least in a while. I haven't kept up with Occams Razor, so I wanted to come back after I've looked up some things on Occams Razor. So Occams Razor is pretty much sort of like assuming, like, okay, say we have solar systems. We can assume there's solar systems because we have a solar system. Since we have a solar system, and even if we don't have enough proof of other solar systems, we can say guesstimate, and we can come to a conclusion that there's other solar systems out there based on our one solar system, making the assumption, or coming to a conclusion based off the least amount of assumptions that we have. So say that there's a sun where our sun revolves around. This is an example that's used. Our sun all these different planets revolve around the sun, and we can assume that obviously, if we have an idea, and if we know that there's obviously other planets and other solar systems out there, other galaxies, other systems working in a similar way to our as our solar system on the level of a solar system, we can assume, like everything else, that that these systems are that. If our solar system is revolving around a sun, and all these planets and everything, it's built in such a way where they have these other smaller structures based on flowing around this much larger structure, or whatever it may be, that all other solar systems, all other systems like this can be concluded to have been revolving around some kind of sun, and I guess the philosophy is, the least amount of assumptions, and they wanted to apply this. I guess Occam's Razor is to apply it to some kind of God, that they're not making the most amount of assumptions that the people, based at the time, based on the ignorance, that you'd assume based on all the scientific proof, the lack of scientific proof, so they relied on God, and so you'd maybe be making all sorts of assumptions when coming to these scientific conclusions based on the reality and experience and understanding reality that you're living in, doing experiments and doing all sorts of things to prove reality. And based on your conclusions, making assumptions based off this, based off of theoretical theories and understanding what exactly is going on, you'd be making more assumptions at that time than just assuming God. So it will be applied to God, something that's sort of outdated at this point, but can be used as a philosophical idea no matter when, and understanding and coming to conclusions based off the lack of a person's argument. Say a person's arguing and they don't bring up any proof enough to discredit your argument's automatically consider the winning argument based on the fact that the person couldn't find it or concede any evidence, can bring up any evidence in opposition to the argument that you had. So lack of contradicting evidence on the arguing side, on the contrary side, is only more proof that you're obviously not conclusive proof, but proof enough that what you're saying obviously is enough to explain away any kind of explain away the credibility of another person's argument and explain more for your credibility if they bring up an irrelevant or a completely preposterous kind of an answer or response to your philosophical idea, and proves more that your philosophical idea holds more water than possibly theirs. They're attacking an offensive point of view, especially. So it's almost in a way holding more water than it did before, because it's just one more idea against the idea that it's refuted or found to stand up to and hold foundation with an argument, opposing argument. So I want to go into this idea of burden of proof too before I end this video. So burden of proof is on the person making the positive claim, and the person making a positive claim based on nothing but the evidence in and of itself. The Bible is only evidence of itself. It only has evidence of itself. The Bible only exists because it exists. There's nothing but proof of the Bible and the things in the Bible but the Bible itself. Everything in the Bible is only proved by the Bible, and the Bible isn't proved by anything else other than itself. So we have to take the Bible, everything seriously. And that's a good example when it comes to burden of proof. Burden of proof is on the person making the positive claim in an argument. So every time a person argues for God, obviously their evidence is lacking when they use an example just saying is the Bible. Well, what proves the Bible? Can you explain that, please? When we're asking a question and things like that, it can be used, obviously applied to religion. That's how it's usually used in arguments. So applying some kind of applying it to some kind of religion or applying it to something like that. Obviously, you have to have sufficient evidence, and evidence in and of itself saying, obviously, the things in the Bible can't be proven by anything but the Bible. But if you have no proof of it, it can't. It's almost saying, like this agnostic atheist thing. You can't disprove anything, and obviously, you're an agnostic on everything. Obviously, you can't debunk it. If you're identifying as a Christian, if you're identifying as agnostic, you know what you're being associated with. You know you're being associated with people that obviously don't you're going to be attacked for believing, obviously understanding. Oh, you must have to be agnostic on everything. You have to be agnostic, not knowing that to any kind of circumstance, unbelievable or not unbelievable circumstance, say such as something like an invisible man standing behind you or a unicorn behind you. Only when you're not sitting understanding or seeing behind. If you're looking forward, then there might be a unicorn behind you, but it disappears right when you turn around. So it's like being agnostic on everything. When you say agnostic, it's a philosophical view, not just on God or anything idea like that, religion. It's something that applies when you identify with it as an agnostic to all sorts of points of view. And the burden of proof is never... the opposition to the burden of proof is never strong enough for someone, say, identifying as agnostic, obviously making a distinction as opposed to, it's an overt distinction making from an atheist. You want to be agnostic or agnostic atheist. I'm open to the possibility and such, these distinctions and so forth and whatnot. So you're making the distinction when you go out and overtly say you're agnostic as opposed to just an atheist. So you're obviously discounting every single burden of proof. Obviously, they can come to conclusions with the fact that they say agnostic, so it shows that there's some kind of doubt in their mind and understanding. There may be, I'm not going to say there's not, but religion I don't believe in, but I believe in everything else. Religion I don't believe in, but I believe in the morals, this, that, and the other thing, and I can open to the possibility of some kind of deity or something like that. So that's obviously a consideration when it comes to explaining these kinds of concepts and ideas. So the burden of proof is on the one making the positive claim, and one making the positive claim without sufficient evidence in defending that claim, obviously is a person that's only leading themselves to a failure in defending what they believe to be true, and understanding that when you make a positive claim, you have to come with a good enough amount of evidence and evidence. It can't not be proven in and of itself. Something that can't be explained or described, it's almost as reading a fiction novel. If you can't prove the things that happen in the novel actually existed by historical documents or by video or pictures or some kind of proof of continuity over time, that can't be proven by any realistic standards based off of everything that's happened, based off experiencing of yourself, understanding the realistic possibilities that exist in the world. There's not much you can do with that. You can't do with anything in the Bible, because Bible or anything like that, because it's all very, it's all very, open. You can have all sorts of things where people say, oh, you can be forgiven, but you're going to go to hell forever, but you can't be forgiven, but you can be forgiven, so you don't have to go to hell. Everything you do doesn't mean anything, but if you kill, it means something, so you're going to hell, but you're not going to hell, you're not going to hell. So yeah, the burden of proof without sufficient evidence doesn't mean anything, and that when you contradict yourself and you cause all sorts of different problems, that only weakens your theory the more you contradict yourself and the theory describing and defending what you're saying. So, yeah, I think that's it in describing burden of proof and things like that. The burden of proof is on the person making the positive claim, and when you don't find that burden of proof on the positive claim against the argument against that good enough, apparently that's almost as taking an agnostic point of view, and understanding, not understanding necessarily that just because it can't be disproven doesn't mean it's true. And so yes, doesn't mean it's true, and almost in a way, if it can't be shown to be true, then it's obviously probably more realistically to assume that it's not true. So yes, and all the documents in the Bible can't be proven to be true. It's all fantastical story, like reading a fiction novel. It's a comparison. It's not something. Very few things in the Bible have any realistic standards standing up to any kind of thing that can be reasonably understood as something realistic. So yes, I appreciate it, and that's all I had to say. Mumbled off on a subject and didn't necessarily keep a coherent train of thought, but I think I covered enough topics and covered them thoroughly enough, so thank you, and until next time, goodbye.